Watch the exact moment Ben Shapiro completely dismantles Representative Ilhan Omar under oath with 9 devastating words, forcing her own Democratic allies to abandon her on national television. The confrontation begins. Representative Ilhan Omar's pointing finger was frozen in the air. On the wooden dais beside her water glass, her smartphone was vibrating, placed face down. 3 rows below her, seated at the witness table, Ben Shapiro wore a sharp navy suit without a necktie, with a black kippah pinned securely to the crown of his head. He had just deliberately slowed his speaking cadence. Gone was the rapid-fire, machine gun rhythm that had characterized his delivery for the previous 93 minutes. He shifted to the heavy, deliberate rhythm of a man delivering 9 specific words he had been carrying like a weight since the morning of October 9th. Madam Congresswoman, you didn't throw the bricks. You painted the targets. The entire hearing room seemed to freeze. The phone on the dais vibrated once again. Representative Omar reached for it, but her hand stalled halfway through the motion. The phone vibrated for a 3rd time, and she left it untouched. In the 3rd row of the observer seating, occupying seat number 4, sat a 39-year-old internal medicine physician named Dr. Moore Toledano Shapiro. She had been gently turning her wedding band around her left ring finger for the entirety of the morning session. Following her husband's statement, she became completely motionless. In the 4th row, occupying seat number 7, sat a 51-year-old clergyman named Rabbi David Edelman of the Beth Jacob congregation, located in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. He had a single sheet of paper folded neatly inside his suit pocket. He had not opened it once, and he did not need to. If there was ever a moment that demanded the nation's undivided attention, it was this exact sequence of events. To fully comprehend how an elected member of the United States Congress was looked directly in the eye on the official record, on national television, and forced to explain how her specific rhetoric ended up sprayed across the walls of a synagogue, one must examine the chain of events that led to this precise standoff in broad daylight. Nobody in that hearing room was truly prepared for the evidence Ben Shapiro was about to present from his device. The committee convenes, room 2175 of the Rayburn House Office Building. The principal hearing room for the House Committee on Education and the Workforce was not originally designed for a confrontation of this magnitude. The hearing had been officially convened by Chairman Tim Walberg, a Republican representative from Michigan, for 1000 on the morning of Wednesday, March 18th. The official title printed on the committee agenda was seemingly bureaucratic: Confronting Campus Anti-Semitism, a federal Title VI review, and the public conduct of members of Congress. The committee had scheduled 3 expert witnesses to provide testimony. The first 2 were university administrators who were expected to deliver standard, heavily vetted, prepared statements. The 3rd witness on the docket was a 42-year-old Orthodox Jewish attorney and media executive from Nashville, Tennessee, named Benjamin Aaron Shapiro. He was the founder of the Daily Wire, a graduate of the Harvard Law School class of 2007, and the author of 17 nonfiction books. The primary reason this specific hearing was taking place on this specific morning was a sequence of 3 historical events that had simply become impossible for the Congressional Committee to ignore any longer. The dates were the 7th of October 2023, the 25th of April 2024, and September 10th. The first date marked the morning of the Hamas terror attacks, which subsequently triggered an unprecedented cascade of an estimated 2,847 verified anti-Semitic incidents across American college campuses. The second date marked the afternoon that Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota stood on a public sidewalk directly outside the gates of Columbia University. While speaking to 3 cell phone cameras, she categorically divided Jewish American 1 8-year-old students into two distinct camps: the pro-genocide Jewish students and the anti-genocide Jewish students. The third date marked the tragic morning when a 1-year-old conservative political activist named Charlie Kirk was assassinated on the campus of Utah Valley University. In the immediate aftermath, Representative Omar had reposted a video to her massive social media following that characterized the deceased activist as a stochastic terrorist, effectively stating that his own monstrous rhetoric was responsible for the bullet that took his life 6 months following that final event. Representative Omar takes her seat. In March of 2026, Chairman Wahlberg brought the committee hearing to order. Representative Omar was seated prominently on the dais because a previous attempt to strip her of her committee assignments, House Resolution 713, introduced by Representative Nancy Mace, had narrowly failed on the floor of the United States House of Representatives in September of 2025. The vote had been 214 to 213, with 4 Republicans crossing the aisle to ensure her political survival. She had retained her powerful seat on the Education and the Workforce Committee. And exactly 6 months later, she intended to exercise the power of that position. She had entered room 2175 at exactly 6 minutes before 10:00 inches the morning. She was dressed in a striking deep teal suit, a pristine white silk hijab, and a gold pin that had belonged to her late grandmother. She placed her smartphone deliberately face down on the wooden surface of the dais. It was the standard, practiced professionalism of a representative who had navigated the political currents of this specific committee since 2021. The device was set to silent mode, programmed only to vibrate at exactly 14 minutes past 10:00. She made the critical miscalculation that would ultimately end her political trajectory. Chairman Wahlberg's voice resonated evenly across the chamber. Having served as a Methodist minister for 14 years prior to his arrival in Congress, he possessed a natural, unforced gravity that did not alter simply because the television cameras were rolling. The committee is now in session. The chair recognizes the witness, Mr. Benjamin Shapiro, for a 5-minute opening statement. Ben Shapiro stood briefly to acknowledge the chair. He placed his personal smartphone face down on the polished witness table and connected it seamlessly via a thin auxiliary cable to the committee's complex audio-visual system, an arrangement a staffer had meticulously prepared hours earlier. He did not opt to stand at the lectern. Instead, he took a seat. A witness sits. When he began to speak, he utilized the familiar rapid-fire rhythm that had propelled his daily podcast for over a decade. It was incredibly fast, intellectually dense, and sharply declarative. However, he deliberately altered his delivery for his opening sentence, speaking slowly enough to ensure that the sensitive microphones captured every single syllable with crystal clarity. Mr. Chairman, Chapter 2, Verse 5. Be strict in your own actions, but never assume the role of judge over a fellow man's heart. I am not here in this chamber this morning to judge any individual heart in this room. I am here strictly to examine a public record. The opening statement, he immediately accelerated his pace. Daily Wire News has meticulously documented 2,847 verified anti-Semitic incidents occurring on American college campuses since the morning of October 7th, including Columbia University 411 incidents, Harvard 326, the University of Pennsylvania 288, Northwestern 194, New York University 183, UCLA 168, Cornell 161, Berkeley 147, the University of Michigan 138, the University of Wisconsin-Madison 133, and the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, located squarely within the Gentlewoman Home District, ladies and gentlemen, 124. He paused, letting the statistical weight settle over the room. Sitting directly behind me in row 4 of the observer seating, seat number 7, is Rabbi David Edelman of the Beth Jacob congregation in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. Beth Jacob serves a community of 850 member families. On the brisk morning of October 9th, exactly 48 hours after the violent attacks on the State of Israel, 6 of Beth Jacob's beautiful stained glass windows were violently shattered with heavy bricks. Red spray paint defaced their parking lot with the phrase, "From the river to the sea." A note violently taped to the heavy front doors of the synagogue contained a single quoted sentence. That specific line was extracted directly from a social media post published on the 10th of February by Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. He strategically chose not to recite the specific words of the quote at that moment. "I yield the remainder of my time, Mr. Chairman, with one overriding question submitted for the official record, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a monumental law passed by this very legislative body in a chamber merely 200 yards from where we are currently sitting, unequivocally protects every single American citizen from insidious discrimination on the fundamental basis of race, color, or national origin in any program receiving federal financial assistance. Title VI did not magically exempt Jewish American students from its protective umbrella. Ladies and gentlemen, I yield." He placed both of his hands flat against the witness table. 43 seconds still remained on the digital clock tracking his time. Chairman Wahlberg subsequently recognized 2 committee members. Representative Burgess Owens of Utah, a black Republican and former Super Bowl champion, utilized his time to ask Mr. Shapiro about the exorbitant security costs associated with conservative speech on campuses. Representative Bobby Scott of Virginia, the highly respected senior Democrat on the committee, followed by posing a dry procedural inquiry regarding the enforcement mechanisms of Title VI within the Department of Education. It was then that Chairman Wahlberg uttered the parliamentary phrase that ignited the primary confrontation. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Miss Omar, for 5 minutes. Omar's counterattack. She did not stand. She adjusted her microphone with practiced ease. "Mr. Shapiro, with all due respect, sir, though I will certainly note for the official record that my reservoir of respect is running incredibly short this morning, I want to begin my time by acknowledging the sheer, unadulterated absurdity of this entire proceeding." She picked up a standard yellow wooden pencil from her desk. She did not use it to write, she merely held it between her fingers as a focal point. "I am a sitting member of this distinguished committee. I have been an elected representative in the United States Congress for 7 long years. I arrived in this country at the tender age of 12, sir, as a traumatized refugee from a sprawling, desperate camp called Dadaab, located in Kenya. My biological mother succumbed to malaria in the war-torn streets of Mogadishu when I was merely 2 years old. My father, who was an honorable high school teacher in Mogadishu before the warlords destroyed our home, raised me entirely on his own in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood of Minneapolis, Minnesota. He did this while surviving on the meager wages of a New York hotel doorman. Statistically speaking, sir, I am not supposed to even be alive, let alone occupying a seat in this room." She raised her finger dramatically. "And yet we are gathered here this morning to entertain the testimony of a man who has dedicated his entire professional career to profiting enormously from the relentless demonization of Muslim women exactly like me. You are a man whose personal Twitter feed was meticulously reviewed as police evidence exactly 93 times by the deranged gunman who confidently walked into the Quebec City Islamic Cultural Center on the chilling evening of January 29th and mercilessly slaughtered 6 of my innocent Muslim brothers during their sacred evening prayers. That is not my political opinion, Mr. Shapiro. That is admitted police evidence. It is the public sworn testimony recorded by the Court of Quebec in the tragic matter of Alexandra Bissonnette. She paused, allowing the gravity of the accusation to hang in the air. Furthermore, you wrote, Sir, in the year 2011 inches the Jerusalem Post, a publication to which you frequently contributed during that era, that, and I quote you directly, half of American Jewry are Jews in name only, end quote. Why? Because in your highly partisan words, they choose to vote for the Democratic Party. You do not possess the divine authority, Mr. Shapiro, to act as the supreme arbiter of who is authentically Jewish and who is not. You only serve as the arbiter of what rhetoric is currently profitable for your media empire. Your own wife, Dr. Moore Toledano, who is sitting directly behind you right now, is, as you have frequently and proudly noted in your published memoirs, a citizen of the State of Israel. It seems the American taxpayer-ES relationship to the State of Israel is consistently framed as the unquestioning relationship of a subservient husband to a demanding wife. The American taxpayer is apparently not permitted to simply ask questions without instantly being branded with the label of an anti-Semite. She was speaking with increasing fervor, the pencil tapping gently against the wood. I am routinely called an anti-Semite simply for demanding answers. You are routinely called a brilliant patriot for stubbornly refusing to provide them. Let me be clear. Donald Trump is a fascist. The American people, acting in their collective wisdom, in their deep economic fatigue, and in their palpable fear, elected a fascist. And Charlie Kirk and may his grieving family find some semblance of peace, sir. May they find every ounce of peace that this divided country can possibly offer them, built a political movement that, by absolutely every metric available to sociologists, oversimplified deeply complex socio-economic realities by systematically demonizing marginalized outgroups. I publicly expressed my genuine sympathy for his family on the 11th of September, but I will absolutely not sit here this morning on the official record of this congressional committee and pretend that the populist movement he championed was anything other than what it truly was. She physically rotated her body, locking her gaze directly onto Rabbi Edelman. And I will absolutely not pretend, sir, that the honorable rabbi in the 4th row, despite his legitimate and heartbreaking personal grief, serves as the singular, undisputed voice for the entire Jewish community of Minnesota. The overwhelming majority of that community, according to every piece of empirical polling data, proudly cast their ballots for me in November 2024. Exactly 81% of Jewish voters in Hennepin County, Mr. Shapiro, voted to send me right back to Washington. Those empirical numbers simply do not lie. A fraught pause descended upon the quiet hearing room. I yield back the remaining balance of my time. Mr. Chairman, she stated firmly, however, I formally reserve my 5 additional minutes for a follow-up inquiry. She placed her yellow pencil completely flat upon the dais. She still did not glance at her smartphone, which had not yet vibrated to signal the incoming crisis. Shapiro S. Rebuttal. Chairman Wahlberg directed his attention down to the witness table. The witness is granted 5 minutes. Ben Shapiro calmly picked up his device, positioning it squarely on the wooden table. Madam Congresswoman, with genuine respect, I would like to meticulously unpack several points you just articulated. I have no intention of fighting you on the foundational facts. His signature machine gun pacing fully returned. I did write the controversial phrase, Jews in name only, in 2011. I was 27, arrogant, and categorically wrong. I have publicly walked that statement back across 15 years. Regarding the devastating Quebec City shooting, Alexandre Bissonnette was a monstrous individual. The undeniable fact that he obsessively checked my Twitter feed prior to that massacre does not place my hand upon the trigger of his weapon. Nevertheless, I will never dispute the public record confirming he interacted with my account 93 times. I have had to sit quietly with that deeply disturbing court testimony for 9 long years. He paused, gathering his breath for a rhetorical pivot. But ma'am, you explicitly accuse me of financially profiting from the malicious demonization of Muslim women. Therefore, I would like to formally play into the permanent record of this hearing a brief clip. Mr. Chairman, may I have permission? The chair grants permission. Wahlberg replied evenly. Shapiro tapped his screen. The committee speakers broadcast an archived recording of a tweet from Omar's official 2019 account. It is all about the Benjamins, baby. Shapiro spoke into the suffocating silence. Madam Congresswoman, that voice is yours. Benjamins is a cultural reference to the $100 bill. Within the context of your post, you were attempting to explain the legislative influence of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee money. Israel, Benjamins. That specific anti-Semitic trope is literally 2,000 years old, documented by Tacitus in the 1st century. He allowed a heavy pause. On March 7th, this legislative body was compelled to pass House Resolution 183 to formally condemn the rising tide of anti-Semitism. The tally was an overwhelming 473 to 23. That resolution was drafted and passed directly because of your spoken words, Madame Congresswoman. Yours. He tapped his screen again. Now, ma'am, with the continued permission of the chair, I would like to enter one additional piece of audio. Wahlberg nodded his consent. The next piece of audio to emerge from the towering committee speakers was again Omar's voice. This time, it had been recorded during the Council on American Islamic Relations annual fundraising banquet at the Hilton Los Angeles Universal City on the evening of March 23rd. It was a public event officially recorded by C-SPAN, firmly established in the public record. CARE was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. 18 seconds of audio. Shapiro began speaking before the echoes of the recording had even settled. Some people did something. 6 incredibly casual words. Madam Congresswoman. 6 words describing the horrific murder of 2,977 innocent Americans. 3 of those slaughtered Americans were practicing Muslims. 22 of them were young children under the age of 16. 343 of them were dedicated members of the fire department of the city of New York. 41 were brave members of the New York Police Department. 55 were dedicated Department of Defense personnel working at the Pentagon. 40 of them were the heroic passengers and crew members of United Airlines. Flight 93 soaring over the fields of Shanksville, Pennsylvania, who courageously fought their way into a hijacked cockpit so that the United States Capitol building, the very building, ma'am, situated 200 yards from where we are currently sitting, would not become the 4th smoking crater on the morning of September 11th. He slowed his pace, significantly lowering the register of his voice. Ma'am, I am absolutely not sitting here today to indict the undeniable hardship of your refugee story. I am the great-grandson of desperate refugees who fled a small town called Mława in central Poland. My great-grandmother Anna Shapiro was murdered at the Treblinka extermination camp in October of 1942, alongside 8 of her closest cousins. We share, ma'am, you and I, the heavy inheritance of the refugee, and I will fiercely defend the honor of your inheritance with my dying breath. He paused, ensuring eye contact. But that inheritance, Madam Congresswoman, comes attached to a profound duty. That duty is the relentless pursuit of precision. Some people did something is not the protective speech of a grateful refugee. Some people did something is the speech of impunity. There is an enormous, unbridgeable moral chasm between those two concepts. He set his phone back down on the table. I yield. Mr. Chairman, 48 seconds still remained on his clock. The financial discrepancies. Up on the dais, the smartphone resting near Ilhan Omar vibrated with urgency. She ignored it. The political tension in the room had escalated dramatically. Omar, a politician who had fearlessly stood on the floor of Congress for 7 years battling Republican commentators, had just been forced to listen to her own voice weaponized against her. She immediately activated her microphone. Mr. Chairman, I am forcefully reclaiming my time. Wahlberg responded methodically. Madam Congresswoman, the witness was actively responding to your direct inquiry under the provisions of House Rule 11, Clause 2, Subparagraph J, and I currently have the official rulebook open directly in front of me. Ma'am, the chair maintains the absolute discretion to permit responsive testimony to fully complete a citation. Mr. Shapiro has now officially yielded. You are recognized for your follow-up. Ma'am. Omar's yellow pencil shifted slightly across the wooden surface. She adjusted her angle of attack. Mr. Shapiro, I would like to pivot and ask you directly about the opaque financial structure of Daily Wire Media. Your media conglomerate is, according to the public record, heavily financed by the Wilkes brothers, Dan and Ferris Wilkes of Cisco, Texas, who are well-known billionaire magnates in the oil and gas industry. I demand to know, sir, how a right-wing media organization entirely bankrolled by oil and gas billionaires can possibly claim the moral authority. She was abruptly cut off. Shapiro did not let the rhetorical question hang. He answered the financial inquiry with a barrage of financial data. Madam Congresswoman, the comprehensive financial structure of Daily Wire Media is entirely available on the public record. You can review our Securities and Exchange Commission filings. The company utilizes private investors fully and legally disclosed under Regulation D. You can consult the State of Tennessee Corporate Registry. You can examine the Federal Election Commission disclosures for the Daily Wire's separate Political Action Committee. Every single document, is public. Every single cent is meticulously audited by KPMG, and none of those funds, and I want to emphatically underline this point, for the committee are paid directly to a member of my immediate family who simultaneously operates as a campaign vendor. His blistering pace did not waver for a fraction of a second. But since the gentlewoman has voluntarily decided to raise the complex issue of campaign finance ethics, I would be delighted to thoroughly address yours. He picked up his smartphone once again. This time, he did not trigger an audio file. He read aloud from a prepared document on his screen. According to the public records maintained by the Federal Election Commission, specifically the committee filings for Ilhan for Congress, designated by Committee Identification Number C00680930, a document readily available to any American citizen via a federal government portal, your campaign committee authorized payments to the firm of E Street Group LLC, totaling $2,780,000 during the calendar year cycle of 2020. E Street Group LLC was at that specific juncture a Washington, D.C.-based political consulting firm. The senior managing partner of that firm was a gentleman named Timothy Minette. A strategic, devastating pause. Mr. Minette, has been your legally wedded husband as of March of 2020. As of this very morning. He deliberately kept his voice calm, refusing to raise it into a shout. In April of 2019, exactly 11 months prior to your marriage, Mr. Minet's first wife, Dr. Beth Minet of Washington, D.C., officially filed for divorce proceedings in the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. It is filed under Civil Action Number 9893. In her sworn legal filing, Madam Congresswoman, which remains a public court record accessible to any curious American at the courthouse located on the corner of Indiana Avenue and 6th Street Northwest, in this very city this morning, Dr. Minet alleged under penalty of perjury that her husband returned to their home in April of 2019 and made what she legally characterized as a, quote, shocking declaration of love, end quote. Specifically, for you, he took a shallow breath. During that exact same month, ma'am, your Congressional Campaign Committee initiated a series of financial reimbursements to Mr. Minet's firm for various travel expenses. Those reimbursements eventually totaled $21,547 over the entirety of the calendar year of 2019. These are public FEC records. Subsequently, on the 17th of November, leaning forward significantly after this controversial matter became a topic of intense public scrutiny, your campaign officially terminated its lucrative contract with Mr. Minet's consulting firm. By that specific date, ma'am, your committee had successfully transferred a staggering $2.78 million to E Street Group. $2.78 million. And that means that approximately 50 cents of every single dollar your political campaign dispersed during that crucial election cycle, half of every hard-earned dollar a working-class individual in Cedar Riverside, Minnesota confidently sent to your campaign, believing they were funding a fight against the oligarchy in Washington, was actually deposited that year into a political consulting firm in which your own husband held a majority equity stake. He let the numbers sink in before delivering the final financial blow. Furthermore, in October of 2025, a mere 6 months ago, the Wall Street Journal published a detailed report revealing that the official financial disclosures you legally filed for the calendar year of 2024 valued Mr. Minet's two private business ventures, a winery situated in California, operating under the name E Street Crew, and a venture capital firm formally registered in the state of Delaware, operating as Rose Lake Capital, at a combined value between $6 million and $30 million. However, shortly after publication, you rapidly amended that sworn disclosure, to drastically revise the claim, stating that the joint household assets of you and Mr. Minet were in startling fact only valued between $18,000 and $95,000. To clarify, the valuation plummeted from $30 million down to $95,000 within a single amended federal filing. Your official spokespeople informed the Journal, that the original, highly inflated valuation was simply, quote, an error, end quote, and conveniently blamed your accounting team. He gently placed his phone back onto the table. When an investigative reporter from Lindell TV politely asked you on camera during the third week of October of 2025 to simply clarify this massive financial discrepancy, you looked directly into the lens and stated, "I think you're stupid for asking me anything," end quote. That is on the public video record. He leaned forward slightly. Madam Congresswoman, I attended Harvard Law School. If any aspiring Harvard Law School student possessed the audacity to tell a credentialed member of the bar that he thought she was stupid for inquiring about a sudden $30 million discrepancy on a sworn federal financial disclosure document, the State Bar Association would swiftly request his immediate presence in person within 30 days. Now, I am well aware that the Federal Election Commission's Office of General Counsel does not operate with the efficiency of a 30-day clock. Ma-am. They typically operate on a sluggish 30-month clock. But make no mistake, they do eventually work. He settled back into his chair. I yield. Mr. Chairman. Omar's defiance. The phone resting on Representative Ilhan Omar's dais vibrated twice in rapid succession. She still refused to pick it up. Omar suddenly stood up. She stood because her political persona was built upon never backing down. She had not lost a high-profile, televised confrontation with a conservative commentator in 7 long years. And she simply refused to believe that the streak was ending now. Mr. Shapiro, she raised her pointing finger once more, her voice trembling with barely suppressed fury. I am the first Somali American ever to serve in the halls of this Congress. I arrived in this country in 1995 at the vulnerable age of 12, alongside my desperate father and my older brother. After languishing for 4 grueling years in the Dadaab refugee camp situated on the perilous Somali-Kenyan border, my mother perished from malaria when I was 2 years old amidst the unimaginable chaos of Mogadishu during the brutal reign of the warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid. My father, a respected teacher of high school history prior to the devastating Civil War, raised me entirely alone. We literally did not possess running water in our dilapidated apartment in Cedar Riverside until I turned 15 years old. We did not own a functional telephone until I was 16. Yes, I have, since my arrival in Washington in 2019, made unfortunate mistakes regarding my choice of language. I have, sir, repeatedly and publicly apologized for several of them. I will absolutely not apologize for others. I have lived a challenging life that, according to absolutely every statistical metric available to modern social science, was never supposed to lead me to a position on this committee floor today. Yet, I am here. I am firmly occupying this seat, and I am asking you, sir, should Ilhan Abdullahi Omar, the proud daughter of Nur Omar Mohammed and Faduma Abukar Haji Hussein, born on the 4th of October 1982 inches, the war-torn city of Mogadishu, be relentlessly judged today by the imperfect precision of the language I utilized at the age of 36 while freshly elected to this chaotic body? Is that the unforgiving metric by which a diverse nation supposedly built on the exhausted labor of refugees should now permanently judge an American legislator? She paused, seemingly regaining control of her vocal register. Her voice steadied. If you are honestly asking me, Mr. Shapiro, whether I should have carefully chosen completely different words on the tumultuous morning of February 10th, the answer is yes, I should have. I was unequivocally wrong. I have stated so repeatedly. The House of Representatives held a formal vote on House Resolution 183. I proudly voted in favor of that resolution. I courageously voted to formally censure my own past conduct. Mr. Shapiro, I am not demanding that you miraculously forget that I made a severe mistake. I am simply asking that you possess the decency to remember that I willingly voted for the very resolution that universally condemned it. The April 25th recording, 8 seconds of heavy, contemplative silence followed her passionate defense. Chairman Wahlberg did not reach for his gavel. She had landed her rhetorical counterpunch effectively. Shapiro allowed the full 8 seconds to pass without interruption. When he finally spoke, his cadence was remarkably slow, operating at half his usual speed. Madam Congresswoman, I have heard you. Ma'am. The harrowing refugee story absolutely counts. The tragic loss of a mother in Mogadishu absolutely counts. The suffering in Dadaab counts. Enduring Cedar Riverside without the basic dignity of running water at age 15 counts. The affirmative vote you bravely cast on the 7th of March in favor of House Resolution 183, it all counts. It genuinely does. I will never sit here and pretend that it does not." He paused, a profound seriousness washing over his features. "But there is another specific date that I am ethically obligated to ask you about today, and it is not 1995. It is not February 10th. The date is April 25th. He reached for his phone one last time. "Mr. Chairman, with the chair's indulgence, I would request permission to play one final brief clip into the record." Wahlberg granted the request with a somber nod. The audio that subsequently echoed from the committee speakers was unquestionably Ilhan Omar's voice. However, this audio was not recorded in a banquet hall or pulled from a polished social media feed. It was recorded by a frantic swarm of reporters on a bustling public sidewalk directly outside the towering iron gates of Columbia University on a crisp, clear spring afternoon exactly 23 months earlier. It was a highly publicized event, indelibly etched into the public record. All Jewish kids should be kept safe, and we should not have to tolerate anti-Semitism or bigotry for all Jewish students, whether they are pro-genocide or anti-genocide. 11 agonizing seconds of audio. The recording stopped. Did Ben Shapiro and Rabbi David Edelman just expose the devastating real-world consequences of Representative Ilhan Omar's divisive rhetoric? Listen closely. Representative Omar sat rigidly, listening to the playback. Briefly, her right hand twitched instinctively toward her vibrating phone. But the motion died at the edge of the dais. Shapiro's voice pierced the quiet room. "You publicly divided Jewish American 8-year-olds, ma'am, while standing on a highly visible Manhattan sidewalk, into two distinct and irreconcilable camps." He took a slow, deep breath. "Sitting directly behind me is Rabbi David Edelman. His daughter Sarah was a Columbia University freshman. She is the proud granddaughter of Rabbi Solomon Edelman, who miraculously survived Auschwitz, walking out in 1945 at the age of 11. He paused. "Within exactly 72 hours of your sidewalk statement, ma'am, Sarah was viciously targeted. She was identified by name on a radicalized Columbia Telegram channel. She was labeled a pro-genocide Zionist target. Attached to that terrifying post was a high-resolution photograph of her dorm room door, taken by a masked individual. The room was perfectly still. Sarah abruptly moved out of John J. Hall. She was forced to finish her spring semester remotely from Minnesota. She transferred to Yeshiva University, the historic institution where her grandfather received his rabbinical ordination after surviving Theresienstadt and the typhus epidemic." 3 seconds of utter silence ticked by. 3 distinct generations. From Wawa to Theresienstadt to Auschwitz to Treblinka, ultimately leading to a targeted dorm room door. And why? Because you casually uttered 3 devastating words. Pro-genocide Jewish students. He carefully placed his phone down. "I yield my time, Mr. Chairman." The phone on Omar's desk vibrated 3 times in rapid succession. Her resolve finally broke. She illuminated the screen, then slowly placed it back down. The rabbi's testimony. Chairman Wahlberg looked at his official agenda. The chair calls Rabbi David Edelman. Rabbi Edelman rose slowly. He was 51, dressed conservatively in a charcoal gray suit. He walked to the witness table, keeping his eyes fixed forward, never casting a single glance toward Representative Omar. The clerk administered the standard oath. "I do," the rabbi replied steadily. Wahlberg stated respectfully, "You are officially recognized for 2 minutes." Rabbi Edelman possessed a folded sheet of paper, but he spoke entirely from memory and from the heart. Mr. Chairman, I am the senior rabbi of the Beth Jacob congregation. My father, Rabbi Solomon Edelman, was born in Poland in 1934. He was merely 9 when he, his mother, and sister were transported to Theresienstadt and then Auschwitz. He was 11 on the morning of January 27th. When the Soviet Red Army breached Birkenau, my young father walked out alive. Tragically, his loving mother and sister did not. He emerged as the sole survivor. His voice was devoid of anger. On October 9th, 48 hours after the Hamas terror attacks, 6 stained glass windows adorning our sanctuary were shattered with heavy bricks. The phrase, "From the river to the sea," was scrawled in spray paint. A handwritten note taped to our door contained a single quoted line extracted verbatim from a tweet posted on February 10th. 2 suspects were eventually apprehended. One assailant, Ethan Carter, had actively reposted the very audio Mr. Shapiro played this morning. Some people did something. My daughter Sarah was an eager freshman at Columbia. Within 72 hours of the Congresswoman's statement, my child was explicitly identified within a radical Telegram channel. They branded her a pro-genocide Zionist target, attaching a photograph of her dorm door. Sarah evacuated. I am incredibly proud of the resilient young woman she has become, and his mother, my grandmother, of whom I possess only one surviving photograph, would undoubtedly be the proudest of us all. A profound silence stretched across the hearing room. Madame Congresswoman, the rabbi concluded softly, I am not asking for a public apology, your resignation, or financial compensation. I am asking only this vital thing. The next time an elected member of Congress stands upon a public sidewalk and flings the words pro-genocide Jewish students into the ether, that she possesses the moral clarity to remember that spoken words do not remain harmlessly on that sidewalk. They travel. He tapped the table gently. They travel. They travel to encrypted telegram servers. They travel to a freshman's dorm room door, and they travel to a quiet synagogue parking lot in Minnesota, arriving violently on the crisp morning of October 9th. My father survived 3 concentration camps before he was 11, painstakingly rebuilding the community stolen from him. We simply do not possess the historical luxury of comfortably forgetting that the careless words we deploy for political gain today will inevitably be read tomorrow by a radicalized man holding a heavy brick. That is the message I traveled to convey. I yield. Omar, sensing the devastating impact of the testimony, immediately attempted to seize control. Mr. Chairman, I formally object to the Wahlberg, interrupted her firmly with a single rap of his gavel. Gentlewoman, please. The Rabbi Edelman has not yet concluded. Madam Congresswoman, I am completely finished, Rabbi Edelman stated quietly. Mr. Chairman, Wahlberg declared. Then the chair officially excuses Rabbi Edelman, accompanied by the profound gratitude of this entire committee. Abandonment by her peers. On the elevated dais, Omar's phone vibrated twice more in quick succession. She stubbornly refused to look at the screen. Chairman Wahlberg directed his eyes downward, consulting his printed agenda. The chair now recognizes, acting upon a point of personal privilege concurrent with the established jurisdiction of this committee, the distinguished gentleman representing the state of Missouri, Congressman Wesley Bell, for exactly 1 minute. Representative Wesley Bell slowly stood up from his seat located in the 3rd row of the observer section. He was 50 years old, a prominent black politician, dressed impeccably in a charcoal gray suit adorned with a small American flag lapel pin. Held tightly in his left hand was a small, visibly worn leather-bound Bible, a cherished gift given to him by his late grandmother in Florissant, Missouri. During the sweltering summer of 1991, as he stood, he deliberately avoided making eye contact with Ben Shapiro. He also avoided making eye contact with Ilhan Omar. His gaze was locked firmly upon Chairman Tim Walberg. "Mr. Chairman, thank you kindly, sir, for granting me the privilege of addressing this chamber. I stand before you as a proud member of the Democratic Party. I have the distinct honor of representing the incredible people of the 1st Congressional District of the state of Missouri that encompasses South Street Lewis, significant portions of Street Lewis County, the resilient city of Florissant, the city of Hazelwood, and the historic city of Ferguson. I took the solemn oath to serve in the United States Congress on the 3rd of January. I am standing here this morning, Mr. Chairman, asserting a point of personal privilege because I have been sitting quietly in this room for exactly 93 minutes, and I have firmly decided that I cannot in good conscience walk out of those doors without clearly stating what I am about to say." He paused, his voice projecting a deep, resonant authority. "In August of the year 2024, I successfully campaigned and won the highly contentious Democratic primary within the 1st Congressional District of Missouri, successfully defeating the incumbent squad member, Cori Bush. That specific electoral campaign rapidly evolved into the most brutally expensive Democratic primary contested anywhere in the United States during that cycle, and the absolute decisive issue that defined that race, ladies and gentlemen of this committee, was the subject of Israel. My loyal constituents, the hard-working, everyday people residing in South Street, Louis, the citizens of Ferguson, the residents of University City, they are the ones who sent me to Washington. And they sent me here because they were fundamentally exhausted, sir. Louis is somehow incapable of being simultaneously pro-civil rights and pro-Israel. They were exhausted from the relentless narrative dictating that black voters residing in the state of Missouri were somehow strictly forbidden from publicly supporting Jewish students attending Washington University in Street Louis. They were utterly exhausted from watching one of their very own community members, the innocent daughter of a dedicated hospital chaplain working at Street Louis University Hospital, being aggressively told to her face that she was somehow pro-genocide simply because she chose to display a small Star of David upon her school backpack. I stand here proudly as the second black Democrat ever sent from the great state of Missouri to serve in the United States Congress. He gripped the leather Bible tighter. "Mr. Chairman, I am standing here speaking today because the hard-working people of my diverse district, people like my mother, who works tirelessly as a hairdresser at the Hair Express Salon on West Florissant Avenue, people like my father, who is a proud retired postal carrier, people like my younger brother, who passionately serves as a public school music teacher in University City, they collectively decided in August of 2024 that the dangerous rhetorical line separating legitimate political solidarity with the suffering Palestinian people from the reckless incitement against a terrified American Jewish college freshman had simply become, and I am directly utilizing their language here, sir, not my own, it had become entirely too thin to safely walk. Slowly, deliberately, Representative Bell pivoted his body. He squared his shoulders and faced Ilhan Omar directly. "Madam Congresswoman, I am emphatically not your political enemy, ma'am. I am not a member of the Republican Party. I proudly voted against the confirmation of the Vice President in 2025. I forcefully voted against the draconian Trump budget proposals. I fully intend to vote against the vast majority of whatever damaging legislation the majority proposes for the remainder of this congressional term. But the horrifying words spray-painted onto Sarah Edelman-S dorm room door, Madam Congresswoman, while they were not your exact words, those individuals utilized your precise political taxonomy to grant themselves the moral license to act. I am humbly asking you, ma'am, before this grueling hearing finally concludes, to simply turn your head, look Rabbi Edelman in the eye just one time, and publicly acknowledge the profound damage that you cannot possibly fix." He paused, offering her the opportunity. Omar remained stoic, refusing to turn her head. "Mr. Chairman," Bell concluded, his voice heavy with disappointment, "I yield my time with immense sorrow." He returned to his seat. Chairman Wahlberg immediately recognized the next member seeking the floor. The chair now recognizes, also on a valid point of personal privilege, the distinguished gentleman representing the state of New York, Congressman Richie Torres. For exactly 1 minute, Representative Richie Torres rose smoothly from his seat, located in the 5th row of the observer section. He was 38 years old, dressed sharply in a dark tailored suit, sporting both a small Puerto Rican flag pin and an American flag pin on his lapel. For years, he had been a relentless, highly visible presence across Twitter, X, and virtually every other accessible social media platform, desperately pleading for his party to draw a clear moral line since the chaotic days of November 2020. "Mr. Chairman, thank you kindly for the time, sir. I, too, stand before you as a proud member of the Democratic Party. I have the great privilege of representing the sprawling 15th Congressional District of the state of New York, encompassing the vibrant communities of the South Bronx. Like my colleague, I forcefully voted against the Vice President's confirmation. I fiercely voted against the partisan Trump budget. I have consistently voted against the vast majority of the legislative agenda the majority has attempted to force through this Congress. I was raised in gritty public housing projects, Mr. Chairman, specifically the Throgs Neck houses, located deep in the East Bronx. My hard-working mother also made her living as a hairdresser. I was raised entirely by a resilient single Puerto Rican mother in a tough neighborhood where, back in 1995, when I was merely 7 years old, the median household income hovered around a desperate $12,400 per year. Torres' voice echoed with undeniable conviction. I am, according to absolutely every conceivable demographic identity marker that a political consultant might slap onto a glossy Democratic primary mailer, sir, a proud member of virtually every marginalized category that Madame Congresswoman would typically attempt to claim, is standing in lockstep solidarity with her. I am Latino. I am openly gay. I am a practicing Catholic. I was raised in profound poverty by an immigrant single mother in a forgotten neighborhood that the rest of elite New York City had conveniently decided to ignore. He paused, ensuring his next words carried maximum impact. And yet, I am absolutely not standing with her this morning. He turned sharply, directing his intense gaze squarely at Representative Omar. Madam Congresswoman, with all due respect, ma'am, I have utilized absolutely every public platform available to me since the turbulent year of 2020, practically begging the influential Progressive Caucus, a powerful bloc to which you proudly belong and to which I proudly do not belong, to draw the moral line clearly, unequivocally, and publicly on the official record, a line separating legitimate, heartfelt solidarity with the suffering Palestinian people from the vile, dangerous dehumanization of American Jews. I have been desperately calling for that specific line to be drawn for 6 agonizing years. And on the 25th of April, you recklessly crossed it. Pro-genocide Jewish students versus anti-genocide Jewish students. Madame Congresswoman, in the tough neighborhoods of the South Bronx where I grew up, we did not maliciously divide the local Jewish kids playing on the crowded corner of East Tremont Avenue and Boston Road into absurd categories of pro-genocide and anti-genocide. We simply called them the Jewish kids. They walked safely to our local public schools alongside us. They attended their synagogue. Their grandfathers skillfully repaired our broken radios. Their mothers patiently taught us mathematics. The dangerous political taxonomy that you callously applied on a crowded sidewalk in Manhattan on the 25th of April was never merely a taxonomy. It was a potent, dangerous license to hate. I yield my time, Mr. Chairman. He sat down abruptly. The sprawling expanse of Rayburn 2175 descended into stunned, absolute silence. The implications were monumental. A prominent black Democrat from Missouri, who had just recently ousted a famous squad member in the most brutally expensive Democratic primary in American history, and a rising star Latino Democrat from the Bronx, a gay Catholic man raised in challenging public housing by a single immigrant mother, had both, on the official record and broadcast live on C-SPAN, explicitly refused to offer even a shred of defense for her actions. Final remarks. Chairman Tim Walberg broke the heavy silence. Mr. Shapiro, you are granted 3 minutes to deliver your closing remarks. Ben Shapiro deliberately slowed his rapid cadence. He maintained his seated posture. Madame Congresswoman, I am going to attempt to do something that the honorable gentleman from the Bronx respectfully requested you to do. I want you to forgive me for taking this liberty, because I believe it is the only productive action left to take as this morning draws to a close. He took a slow breath. I desperately want you to know, ma'am, that I truly see you. I acknowledge and respect that you arrived in this country in 1995 as a terrified 2-year-old child. I recognize the profound tragedy that your mother died in Mogadishu when you were merely 2. I comprehend the stark reality of the Dadaab refugee camp in 1993. I honor what your devoted father sacrificed to extract you from that despair. I understand the freezing reality of what the Cedar Riverside neighborhood felt like during your first winter in Minneapolis, huddled in a cramped apartment entirely devoid of running water. I know these things. He leaned forward, his voice softening. I know them because I, too, am the great-grandson of desperate refugees. My resilient great-grandmother, Anna Shapiro, born in Poland in 1898, was systematically murdered at the Treblinka extermination camp in October of 1942, dying alongside 8 of her closest cousins. My beloved grandfather, Daniel, was born in the bustling streets of the Bronx, merely 6 blocks from where Congressman Torres was raised. He lovingly taught me to chant the sacred Shema prayer when I was 4. My brilliant wife, Moore, sitting directly behind me, was raised in Tel Aviv. Her brave father served honorably in the Six-Day War. She is a respected physician today entirely because her determined parents boarded a one-way flight in 1972. We genuinely share a profound refugee inheritance, Madam Congresswoman, you and I. He paused, ensuring the emotional weight resonated. But that sacred inheritance comes permanently tethered to an unyielding duty. The solemn requirement to constantly remember that the careless words we deploy in public do not simply evaporate into the ether where we say them. They travel. On October 9th, your words traveled violently through the air, crashing through a delicate stained glass window at a peaceful synagogue in Street Lewis Park. Your specific words traveled directly to a terrified freshman's dorm room door inside John Jay Hall. On September 10th, less than 12 hours after Charlie Kirk's lifeless body was carried out of Utah Valley University, your words traveled directly to a town hall where you callously described the very men and women who requested civil debate as being full of expletives. He shook his head slowly. Words travel, ma'am. As instructed by Pirkei Avot, be strict in your own actions, but never assume the role of judge over a fellow man's heart. I am unequivocally not judging your hidden heart today. I cannot possibly do that. I am, however, pointing out the devastating trail of destruction that your reckless words have left lingering in their wake on an encrypted messaging channel, on a frightened Manhattan dorm room door, on shattered stained glass, scattered across a floor in Minnesota. 3 seconds of utter silence filled the room. You didn't throw the bricks, Madame Congresswoman. You painted the targets. 3 agonizing seconds dragged by. I yield my time. The aftermath, the smartphone resting upon Representative Ilhan Omar's desk, erupted, vibrating 4 consecutive times. She stubbornly refused to look down. Instead, she stood abruptly, her voice ringing with defiance. Mr. Chairman, I will absolutely not sit here and be lectured by Chairman Wahlberg, struck his wooden gavel once, hard. Gentlewoman, please. She desperately attempted her trusted parliamentary maneuver. Mr. Chairman, I am aggressively reclaiming my remaining time. Wahlberg's tone brokered no further debate. Madam Congresswoman, the witness has officially yielded back his time. The chair is going to ask the esteemed ranking member, Mr. Scott, whether the minority possesses any formal objection to a parliamentary motion to permanently suspend any further questioning of this witness. Bobby Scott, the deeply respected senior Democrat, slowly stood up. He spoke in a voice so quiet that the sensitive microphones nearly failed to capture the audio. Mr. Chairman, the minority registers absolutely no objection to the chair's discretion in this matter. Omar turned her head slowly toward the senior Democrat, who had just sealed her political fate. She looked desperately toward her closest allies, but they stared blankly at the floor, defeated. I yield, she whispered. Following a recess, her seat on the elevated dais remained glaringly empty. She had quietly exited through a discreet side door, walking out entirely alone into the Washington afternoon. The profound reverberations radiated outward. In Minnesota, Rabbi Edelman sat silently in his vehicle, staring at the restored stained glass windows of his congregation. In Manhattan, Sarah Edelman closed her chemistry textbook to attend evening prayer service at Yeshiva University. In the South Bronx, Representative Richie Torres sat at his mother's kitchen table, gratefully consuming a homemade meal. In Missouri, Representative Wesley Bell sat idling in a high school parking lot, quietly reading a verse from the book of Micah. And in Nashville, Ben Shapiro finally walked through his front door. He kissed his wife gently, confirmed to her that the day had been good, and watched his daughter gracefully light the flickering Sabbath candles. The ensuing months delivered relentless accountability. Omar's chief of staff resigned. The Federal Election Commission opened an investigation into her family's financial disclosures. A groundbreaking piece of legislation mandated the strict public disclosure of all congressional social media activity. Sarah Edelman bravely returned to Columbia University to speak eloquently on religious safety, publishing an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. The Beth Jacob congregation received a wave of unsolicited donations, allowing Rabbi Edelman to commission 3 magnificent stained glass windows for the sanctuary. The final window was inscribed with 3 Hebrew words, Lo Nishkach,